The Baal Shem Tov, we've all heard the name and we've all heard the story as well. I have a story for you that perhaps you haven't heard, a special one. See, the Baal Shem Tov often gave instructions to each of his students, telling them what their particular mission was in this world, what they should spend their time devoted to. One Chassid, he told before his death that this Chassid should go around as a traveling, wandering storyteller. He said to tell the stories of the experiences he had first-hand account with the Baal Shem Tov and ones he had heard. So, very diligent to the task. After the passing of the Baal Shem Tov, he spent about 10 years traveling from place to place telling these stories. On one occasion, he met a certain Jew who told him, "Oh, you tell stories of the Baal Shem Tov. You know, I heard that there's a wealthy man in Vitebsk who will pay a huge sum for stories of the Baal Shem Tov. In fact, for every new story, he'll pay 10 rubles. For every story he's already heard before, he'll pay another 5 rubles. And he'll even pay travel expenses." When this Chassid heard this, he was blown away. Right away, he didn't even think twice. He hopped on a carriage and made his way to Vitebsk. As he came to Vitebsk, it was already Thursday late at night. He was exhausted. Come Friday, he had told this wealthy man that he was happy to tell stories, and this wealthy man was overwhelmed with joy. He said, "You'll be my guest Friday night, and I'll invite plenty of people and make a thing of it." But suddenly, come the Friday night meal, the Chassid drew a complete blank. He couldn't think of a single story. "No problem," said the wealthy man. "Come back tomorrow for the Saturday meal, and I'll again bring out everyone. I have no doubt by then you'll have a story for me." Again, Saturday, he's sitting there at the meal, and he's drawing a complete blank. He can't remember a single story, which is absurd, because he knows like thousands of stories. He can't understand what's going on. Again, he has to apologize to the wealthy man. "I made all these promises of stories I was going to tell him. I can't tell him anything." So the wealthy man said, "We'll do it one more shot. Maybe after Shabbos, maybe you'll feel better." After Shabbos, unfortunately, he still couldn't think of a single story. He was so dejected. He said to the man he was very sorry, and off he went to find a carriage to make his way out of the city. The man was kind enough to give him a few coins to at least be able to travel. And suddenly, as he was about to leave, he suddenly remembered a story. He turned and he ran back. He told the wealthy man, "I have a story for you." The man was ready. He says, "You know, once," this often happened, but once, the Rebbe assembled 10 of us, 10 Hasidim, and he said that we should all hop in the wagon. We're going on an adventure. This happened all the time. We didn't know where we're going. Suddenly, like, the wagon would take off. The horses would go. He would tell Alexei, the carriage driver, to let go of the reins, and they would go where they would go, and it felt like we were flying. Suddenly, we came to a village that was completely deserted, a village none of us recognized. We looked around. All the stores were closed. Everything was completely shut. And we saw that in the center of the town, there was a giant pulpit, and there were giant crosses put up, and otherwise everything was deserted. The Baal Shem Tov instructed us to continue on, and we found our way to the Jewish quarter. Again, it was completely deserted. Suddenly, the Baal Shem Tov came to a certain house. He knocked on the door. The guy opened it. He says, "What are you doing? Are you crazy? Come on in quickly. You're lucky you made it this far." Came in, and he bolted and he locked, and he put a million locks on the door, it seemed. He says, "You guys are so lucky. It's the eve of their festival, and when Easter comes around here, they're about to have the Bishop Thaddeus go ahead and speak on the pulpit. Thousands of them will be there, and he's going to rile them up in complete anti-Semitic libels like you can't understand. And you're lucky that you guys found refuge before this happens. Even this might not be a refuge, to be honest, because of how riled up they get." Baal Shem Tov turns to the Chassid and he says, "I have a mission for you. I want you to go back to that center where you saw the pulpit. And by now the people will be there and the bishop should be ready to give his fiery sermon. I want you not to be afraid. Make your way to the front of the crowd, and before he even speaks, tug on his red robe and tell him that the Baal Shem Tov wants to see him right now." Chassid, being a true Chassid, didn't even ask questions, immediately left. The man who had just let him in was dumbfounded. This is a self-sacrifice. This is complete lunacy. The Chassid went and he saw there were indeed thousands of these people out there, and the bishop was walking up to the pulpit getting ready to speak, and he somehow was able to slip to the front almost undetected. And without anyone noticing, he pulled on the robe of the bishop right before the bishop was about to tell his sermon. The bishop looked at him and he immediately almost went pale. He was stunned. "What do you want?" The Chassid said, "The Baal Shem Tov, my master, has sent me here. He says he wants to speak to you right now." The bishop was almost at a loss for words. He says, I can't right now. I tell him I'll come right after this is over. The Baal Shem Tov said right now. He says, please tell him I'll come right after I'm done. So the Chassid somehow was able to again leave this giant crowd undetected, made his way to the Baal Shem. The Baal Shem Tov said, "No, after it will be too late. Go back and catch him." So he quickly gets back, and somehow he was able to get back and make his way to the front again. And he pulls on the robe and he says, "The Baal Shem Tov says it'll be too late." But this bishop all of a sudden starts shaking his head and he says, "I'm getting a vision, everyone. I'm getting a vision. The heavens are trying to speak to me. I need to listen." And he quickly dips out the back and he says, "Take me to him now." So he takes him to this Jewish ghetto, and they come to the front door, and the Baal Shem Tov shouts from the other side of the door, "Do not let him come in here with those crosses on him." So he takes off all these crosses that he was wearing on his body, and as he came in and saw the Baal Shem Tov, he broke down in tears, dropped to the ground, completely broken. The Baal Shem Tov said, this guy was born a Jew actually, and he was actually bar mitzvah at his 13th year. But then he went off course and he got swept up in all this nonsense of these idolatrous beliefs, and he got brought into the church and he made it to the top of the church, but deep down he's still a Jewish soul. And I saw in the heavens that this was a propitious time that maybe I could get through to him. Anyways, come in with me. And the Chassid says that the Baal Shem Tov went with this bishop into the room for an hour. No one knows what was said there or what happened there. But all we know is that he came out, he removed his robe from his body, and he left. No one ever saw him again. And that's the story, the Chassid said. That's the only story I can remember. And he looks up at this wealthy man, and the wealthy man is in tears. The wealthy man says to him, "I was that pope. And the Baal Shem Tov told me that my repentance would be complete when someone would come back here and tell me my own story. That's why I've been paying so much money for all these storytellers to tell me stories of the Baal Shem Tov. And finally today you've told me my story. So it seems that, thank God, my repentance has finally been accepted." Never underestimate the power of a story.